Meizu has been slinging flagship devices at the market for years now, but those have been having a hard time sticking around in meaningful numbers. This is especially true lately as local rival Xiaomi has been showering itself in glory, overshadowing Meizu in the process. Now, with the MX4, Meizu is ready to try again. Plenty is on offer with this phone, including a big 5.4-inch display, an octa-core processor and a 21-megapixel camera. For this, you have to whip out $450, but don't expect to find this phone on the shelves of your local store. So does the attractive price tag and the seemingly infallible specs make the MX4 a competitive device? This is Chris with Phone Arena, let's find out. The Meizu MX4 packs a 5.4-inch screen that's plenty big. So how big of a device are we talking about? Well, the MX4 is actually slightly smaller than the LG G3, which is great. The device is also kind of light at 5.19 ounces, and that's always good news. Meizu's latest flagship feels very solid in the hand and matches your palm nicely thanks to that rounded back, so overall ergonomics are excellent. The materials used with the phone are well selected as well. We've got a metal frame and a very soft plastic shell at the back. Metal is also used with the power and volume keys, both of which provide excellent tactile feedback, though the former is located at the top, which is a problem with devices this big. Overall, we can't say that the MX4 won us over with its looks. It's not bad by any and all means, but the rear shell is kind of unsightly. An extra big 5.36-inch IPS screen is what the MX4 has going on. The resolution is a bit odd at 1152 by 1920, but it's good for the excellent 418 pixels per inch. For protection, Meizu is using a Gorilla Glass 3 cover, which should safeguard against scratches and even small drops. Also excellent are the maximum and minimum levels of brightness the display can produce, 535 and 2 nits respectively. These numbers are corroborated by our own findings, as reading the screen outside was easy even with the sun over our shoulder, and the extremely low brightness of the panel also allowed for a comfortable viewing during the night. As for the screen's core reproduction, we're looking at acceptable deviations from the target, though the core temperature at 7778 kelvins is a bit too high, and that results in a bluish overcast. The display's coldness is not its only drawback though, as gamma at 2.01 is also subpar. Ideally, that number would have read 2.2. In order to differentiate its products from the competitors, Meizu is actually using a custom software on its devices. The company's custom Android overlay called FlymeOS and based on Android 4.4 KitKat has been around for a while, and that shows. FlymeOS is pretty different from what we're used to. To start off, there's only one capacitive navigation key on the bottom bezel, a circle for home. On either sides of it, there's nothing, but both areas are actually active and work only if you swipe them up, which brings up a small horizontal tab with your recent apps. If you simply want to go back a step, you just swipe up the home button or use the on-screen back button when available. The icon set is quite different too, but we mostly like the flat and extremely stripped down visuals. We also like Meizu's take on the notification and settings menus, both of which are attractive and down to the point. In terms of extras, as you might expect, there are only a few. Interestingly enough, Meizu has implemented a feature that is identical to Apple's Spotlight search, including the way you call it up from the home screen, with a swipe up at the upper part of the screen. Whatever Meizu calls this feature, its function is quite simple, to allow you to perform quick searches with a scope that transcends beyond what's on your smartphone, as it looks up stuff online too. Like so many other Chinese manufacturers, the MX4 also comes with its own theme engine and app store. Both of these are filled with extras, like a ton of custom themes, but at least on our sample model of the MX4, these are both in Chinese, so they're pretty much impossible to navigate. Lastly, there's a Security Center app, which is more of a suite type deal, as it allows you to clear out junk files, identify which the largest files on your MX4 are, and also even look out for viruses. Aboard the MX4 is the just released octa-core MediaTek MT6595 along with 2GB of RAM. The chipset has two clusters of 4 cores working in an ARM Big Little configuration. In simpler terms, this means that the chipset intelligently evaluates the task at hand and switches between the two clusters depending on the number crunching requirements. So, for example, if your phone is idling and just receiving notifications from Viber or Facebook or something like that, the processor will likely just use the power-efficient Cortex-A7 cluster to do the work, saving you battery in the process. If, however, you need the phone to go full out because you are gaming, for example, it has the ability to force all 8 cores to work simultaneously. As for the GPU on board, we're looking at a quad-core PowerVR G6200. All of this translates well when synthetic benchmarks or actual real-life usage are involved. Most of the benchmarks we did were positive, though some were a bit of a letdown and indicated weak graphics performance. In our experience, however, the MX4 ran very intensive games like Asphalt 8 more than just fine, so it could be that a driver or a line of code is breaking something. In any case, and on the whole, this is the most powerful MediaTek chip to date, and it will handle whatever you throw at it well. Finally, as far as the internal memory goes, there are 3 models available: 16GB, 32GB and 64GB. Unfortunately, none of these will allow you to expand through a micro SD card, so keep that in mind. Until recently, most Chinese devices lacked LTE connectivity, but that is no longer the case. The MX4, however, only supports Category 4 FDD LTE bands 1, 3 and 7, and that means that you'll be able to use LTE in Europe but not the States, which is unfortunate. The MX4 is also equipped with assisted GPS with GLONASS support, Bluetooth 4.0, dual-band Wi-Fi, NFC and even MHL. For browsing, you have 2 options, the built-in browser by Meizu and Google Chrome. We'll be blunt and say that Meizu has got some work to do on its browser before it can be any kind of challenger to Chrome, as there are very noticeable delays, especially when navigation is concerned. In other words, stick to Chrome and you have a no-frills browsing experience. On board the Meizu MX4 is an excellent 21MP Sony IMX220 stacked sensor. Size-wise, this is a pretty big unit, on par with the one found in the Sony Xperia Z3. The sensor is complemented by a 2-tone LED flash and quick autofocus. Up at the front, we've got a 2MP selfie cam capable of 1080p video capture. Starting with the UI, that's probably one of our favorite parts of the Meizu MX4's camera. It's definitely not perfect though. For example, certain elements need to be recoded so they can switch to landscape orientation. But on the whole, this is still a very fresh take on what is a fairly stale experience. Most of the options are located at the bottom and the design of the menus is pleasant and easy to grasp. To change to a different shooting mode, you simply have to swipe left and right horizontally. Speaking of modes, there are quite a few available, including HDR, panorama, beauty, light field, night shots, and of course manual with controls for ISO, exposure, shutter speed and focal length. So high marks on the software, but does that indicate a great image quality? On the whole, yes, and very much so. The images the MX4 snaps in broad daylight are attractive, very detailed and mostly have their exposure and co-reproduction spot on. We say mostly because occasionally snaps did come out slightly underexposed, while others had white balance issues and appeared visibly purplish. HDR mode is also best left alone unless you've got a tripod handy or have very steady hands. Otherwise, ghosting and blur are pretty much guaranteed, not to mention that photos look artificial. Indoors, as long as you don't shoot in complete darkness, you can expect the MX4's camera to churn out well-balanced snaps in terms of colors and exposures on the whole, and ones that are, again, very detailed. As soon as the dual-tone LED flash gets involved, however, you've got a problem. Our studio shots clearly show this, but let's just say that snaps come out with an aggressive green fringe. Turning to video capture, we're happy to see that Meizu has again gone the extra mile. You've got 1080p video capture, 4K UHD capture, and even slow-mos at 100 frames per second. As for quality, we liked what the camera can do. 1080p footage is clear, smooth, and the software is very quick to adjust exposure, not to mention that it cancels out even very loud background noises. On the downside, footage still was a tad darker than ideal, and there is no automatic continuous focus. The 5.4-inch display of the MX4 is perfect for watching video on the go. For that, you need to make use of the built-in video player app, which is pretty standard and straightforward. The only extras present are the ability to miniaturize the playback window and to set videos to loop. Thankfully, the MX4 has all that's needed and reproduces essentially every encoding we could think of problem-free. As for the music player, it's also basic, though it might feel advanced if compared with the stock Android app. Here we have a piece of software that's interconnected with Meizu's Chinese store, though we can obviously switch the view to local content only. Unfortunately, extras like equalizer are only available with earphones on. Speaking of music, we've got to note that the MX4's mono loudspeaker on its bottom side is very powerful and easily fills a medium-sized room with sound. Audio fidelity is also pretty great for a smartphone. The MX4's in-ear speaker is nothing to fawn over. It's relatively loud and the tonal information that allows you to easily identify specific voices is there, but there's distortion and the sound coming out of it is flat and sometimes even hissy. The microphone, on the other hand, had a better showing as voices were more successfully fetched to the other side without as many serious artifacts in sound. That said, we're again talking about middling performance at best. Nothing fancy, but nothing terrible either. Meizu has endowed the MX4 with a hearty 3100 mAh battery pack. The unit is of the non-removable type, even though you can lift off the rear shell, so changing the battery in case of a problem won't be straightforward at all. Meizu's new flagship clocked 7 hours and 25 minutes on our custom battery life test, putting it in the same league with devices like the Galaxy S5 and the HTC One M8. In our experience, the MX4 is a 2 days per charge device, and that's awesome. To help you squeeze out even more juice out of the pack, Meizu has also included a dedicated power saving mode, though it doesn't have any description attached to it. From experience, we'd wager that we're most likely looking at a simple processor underclock, as connectivity does not seem to be affected. So there you have it, a worthy flagship device that can be had for the price of a much inferior upper mid-range phone from a brand like Sony, LG or Samsung. That said, do keep in mind that the phone ships from Hong Kong and no warranty repairs will have to be carried out there as well. So it follows that the MX4 has to deliver and deliver in full. Well, thankfully to a very big extent it actually does. The design isn't anything jaw-dropping, but it's still fairly attractive and the phone is very sturdy and comfortable to use for its screen size. The display is pretty great too and performance is also top-notch. The 21 megapixel Sony camera at the back is seriously no joke either. Last but not least, the MX4's 3100 mAh battery ensures day and a half of juice even with hard usage. On the downside, the sample unit we received had Meizu's Chinese app and team stores integrated into its interface, which is a bit of a letdown. After all, we don't know Chinese. If you're willing to turn a blind eye to that, however, then the Meizu MX4 is a great flagship for those of you on a smaller budget. Once again, this was Chris with Phone Arena, thank you for tuning in.